In this video, we will be applying the quadratic formula. These are going to be the more advanced problems. If you want the more basic problems to get started first, please see that video first. Okay, so in order to use the quadratic formula, first everything has to be set equal to 0, and obviously that's not the case here. Okay, so we've got a couple of options. We can move everything over to the right or move everything over to the left. I'm going to opt to move everything over to the right so that this term can be positive. So what I'm going to do is add 4x squared, and I'm also going to add a 12x to both sides. So plus 4x squared plus 12x. That means that this side over here will be a 0 equals, and then the 4x squared plus 12x minus 5. Okay, so let's write down what our a, our b, and our c is. A is the number in front of x squared, so a is equal to 4. Okay, b is the number in front of x, so b is equal to 12. And c is the number by itself, which is -5. Okay, so we're using this formula. We're going to put the letters, or the numbers, like for a, will go in the a's right here. Okay, and the b's will go where the b is, and the c will go where the c is. Okay, so let's do that. So x is equal to negative b, so -12, plus or minus the square root of 12 squared, b squared, so 12 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is -5. Okay, and then on bottom, we'll have 2a, so 2 times 4. Okay, so let's clean this up. This parentheses is no longer needed, so there's the -12 plus or minus the square root. 12 squared is 144. Okay, and this, if you multiply, you'll notice that those two will be positive. Okay, because you multiply two negatives. So it's going to be 4 times 5 is 20, times another 4 is 80. So plus 80 all over 8. Okay, now if you add up the inside of that square root, -12 plus or minus the square root of, it's going to be 224. If you add these two numbers up, divided by 8. Okay, now we want to see if we can reduce that 224 by seeing if it's divisible by any square numbers. So remember, your square numbers are 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, and so on. Okay, that's 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared, 6 squared, and so on. Okay, so let's see if it's divisible by any of those real quick. So 224 divided by 4. Yes, it is. What about 16? Okay, that's better because it's a bigger prime number. Okay, so 16 goes in evenly, and 14 is the product of 2 and 7, so we can't go any further than that. Okay, so we will split this up into 16 times 14. So x is equal to -12 plus or minus the square root of 16 times 14 over 8. We will now square root that 16 out, so -12 plus or minus the square root of 16 is 4. The 14 stays inside because it's as reduced as it can be, divided by 8. One last step to get this thing as reduced as possible is we divide these three numbers, not the square root, just those three numbers, the numbers in front of the square root, this number, and this number, are all divisible by 4. So I'm going to divide each one of them by 4. Okay, so that will give me, let's see, a -3 plus or minus, the 4's cancel here, so it's just square root of 14 over 2. Okay, if you want to split it up into two separate ones, you can do it a couple different ways. You can do this, -3 over 2 plus or minus square root of 14 over 2. That's an acceptable form. You could also, if you wanted to split it up into two separate answers, you could do this, -3 over 2 plus square root of 14 over 2, and -3 over 2 minus the square root of 14 over 2. Okay, let's go on and look at another problem. Okay, for this one, it looks like we have some distribution to do first, and then we need to pick a side to move everything over before we can start using the quadratic formula. So I will go ahead and distribute that 2x to that parentheses. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times -3 is -6x equals 4 plus x. Okay, this time, since our x squared term is positive, I am going to keep this over here, and I will move the other stuff over here with it. So here's the minus x and the minus 4. So 2x squared, negative 6x minus x is negative 7x. And the minus 4, there's nothing to minus it from, so we just write it down. And there we go. Okay. So now we need to figure out the quadratic formula. So a, b, and c. A is a number in front of x squared, 2. B is the number in front of x, negative 7. And c is the last number, negative 4. Okay, so quadratic formula, x is equal to negative b. Our b is already negative, so we have a negative and a negative here, plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 7 squared, make sure and put that in parentheses, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 4. All divided by 2a, so 2 times 2. Okay, let's clean that up. The negative times a negative becomes a positive here. So 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared is 49, positive. Okay, and then these three numbers, the negative 4 and negative 4 will give you 16, positive, times 2, which will be 32. Okay, over 4. If you add those two on the inside of the square root, 7 plus or minus the square root, you get, let's see, 49, 59, 69, 79, 81. Okay, over 4. And this one actually has a square root. 81 has a square root, so it's going to be 9. So this is equal to 7 plus or minus 9 over 4. Okay, so at this point, all the square roots are gone, so we'll split this up and get the actual numerical answers here. So our first one will be 7 plus 9 over 4, and our other one will be 7 minus 9 over 4. Clean those up, the top will be 16 over 4, which 16 over 4 is 4. That's our first solution. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. Negative 2 over 4 reduces to negative 1/2. So x is equal to 4 and negative 1/2. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Okay, on this one, this looks like a lot of distribution first before we can start the problem. Okay, so first we got these two parentheses, so the 6x will go to both, and then the 5 will go to both. On this one, it's the negative 2x that will go to both. Okay, so let's do that. So 6x times x is 6x squared. 6x times negative 3 is negative 18x. 5 times x is 5x. And 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Now for the other side of the equal sign, negative 2x times 7x is negative 14x squared. Negative 2x times 5 is negative 10x. And then plus x minus 12. Okay, we'll combine terms on both sides. We got some x's over here that can be combined, and we also have some x's over here that can be combined. Okay, so we get 6x squared minus 13x, that's these two, minus 15, equals negative 14x. Let's see, negative 10x and an x makes a negative 9x minus 12. Okay, so I'm going to move everything over to this side. So all this stuff will move over. So whoops, I forgot to put the square on this, didn't I? So I'll add each one of these terms. Here's the plus 14x squared to both sides. Here is the plus 9x to both sides. And here is the plus 12 to both sides. Okay, it'll cancel out all of this and leave a 0 on the right side. Over here, we add those two, you get 20x squared minus 4x, it's these two, and then minus 3. And on the right side, we have 0. Okay, so we need to figure out our a, b, and c. So our a is a number in front of x squared, which is 20. Our b is a number in front of x, which is negative 4. And our c is the number by itself, which is negative 3. Okay, so here's the formula right here. So let's write it down. X is equal to negative b, so negative negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 20, times 3, which is negative 3, divided by 2a, so 2 times 20. Okay, so we need to clean this up. Here the negatives cancel out. That gives us a positive 4. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. Let's see, this is -4 times -3, which is a 12, and 12 times 20 will be 240. Divided by, and 2 times 20 is 40. Okay, let's combine those inner terms right there. So 4 plus or minus square root of 256 over 40. Okay, 256 actually is a square number. 16 squared is 256. So this will reduce to 16. So 4 plus or minus 16 over 40. Okay, so let's split this up into two separate solutions. X equals 4 plus 16 over 40 and 4 minus 16 over 40. Okay, so this would be 20 on top over 40, which reduces to 1/2. And this would be negative, let's see, that'd be negative 12 over 4, which is -3. Oh, excuse me, I missed a zero here. That changes things. So it's actually not -3. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so if we divide the top and bottom by a 2, you would get -6 over 20. Divide by 2 again, you get -3 over 10, and it can't be reduced anymore. So there are your two solutions for x. Okay, one more problem. Okay, the only thing that's different about this is that we have fractions. So when you have fractions, you can use them in the quadratic formula, but I highly recommend that you multiply through by the greatest or the least common multiple of the bottoms of the denominators. That way you can get rid of the fractions. So we've got denominators of 5 and 2. So we're just going to multiply everything by 10, which is 5 times 2. Multiply every term in the problem by 10. So 10 times, and I'm going to multiply here, here, and here. Okay, so if I multiply 2/5 times 10, that would be 20 over 5, which is 4. Okay, so you get 4x squared. If I multiply 10 times 2x, it is 20x. And if I multiply 10 times -5 over 2, 10 times 5 is 50, divided by 2 is 25, so -25. Okay, so we've gotten rid of all the fractions. Now I'm going to just move this stuff over to the other side by adding the opposites. So minus 20x and plus 25. Okay, so that will give me 4x squared minus 20x plus 25 equals 0. Okay, so now I need to figure out what my a, b, and c are. The a is the number in front of x squared. That's 4. The b is the number in front of x, which is -20. And the c is the number by itself, which is 25. Okay, I'm using this formula again one last time. Okay, so I get, oops, excuse me, move the camera. I get x equals -b. The b is already negative, so -20, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -20 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 25, all divided by 2a, so 2 times 4. Okay, so let's clean that up a bit. The negatives go away right here. So it's x is equal to 20 plus or minus the square root of -20 squared is 400. Okay, and if we multiply these through, 4 times 25 is 100, and 100 times -4 is -400. So we have a -400 on the inside there, and the bottom becomes an 8. So since the square root became 0, and I can write that down, so it's 20 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 8, and the square root isn't needed anymore, and neither is the plus or minus because it was on the square root. So this whole part of it just goes away, and you get x is equal to 20 over 8, and do a quick reduction by dividing the top and bottom by 4, or let's just do it divide by 2 twice. So divide by 2, it's 10 over 4. Divide by 2 again, it's 5 over 2. So x is equal to 5 over 2. And that's it.